Yes, I'm your host, Brien Gearin, back with you today. And on this edition of the MU Pod, I'm joined by Katherine O'Brien. She's the owner of Cream Cruiser, a mobile dessert bike business in Baltimore, Maryland. She also owns Bike Business University, where she teaches others how to create their own bike business from her 10 plus years of awesome experience. Katherine, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much. I am super excited to chat and share a little bit more about my story.
Me too. I can't wait to dive in because your concept is so cool to me. And so growing up, my whole family lived on the East Coast. I know we didn't talk about that before we hopped on, Katherine, but I had grandparents on the Cape. I've got family in Boston, so kind of the northeast side of New England. And we'd always grow up going to the beach there. And there was always an ice cream guy. Now, he was an old crusty dude with a bell and an ice cream truck. But when I saw your business, I was like, what a cool concept. It's a dessert bike that you can probably cruise around the boardwalk or the beach, post up wherever you want, and sell your delectable treats. So today we want to learn all about how you created your business, why you created it, how you built it, what it's become today, and then talk about some of the guts of your business. What are the margins like? What's your team like? How did you hire? And of course, we want to know a little bit more about Bike Business University as well. So Katherine, let's start right there. What's your story? Like, what exactly is Cream Cruiser and how did it come to be?
So I started 10 years ago, which is crazy. This was my 10th summer selling ice cream. And at the time, I was working a regular day job in Baltimore. I was working in marketing, branding, and strategy. That's always sort of been my area of expertise. I felt myself just kind of like going through the motions and living for the weekends and sort of your stereotypical like 9 to 5er. And I always knew that I had a desire to create something that was my own, but never really had any plan on what that was. At the time, I was walking to work through the Inner Harbor in Baltimore, and over like a hot summer day, there were so many people that, I mean, sometimes you could hardly like walk. You had to kind of like shimmy your way through. And I would always think like, there's always street vendors down there. Like, what could I sell? Like, there was such a crazy crowd that I was always kind of like daydreaming of like, there has to be something I could sell. What better product than ice cream on a hot summer day? But because I had no plan, I had no business plan at this point, like investing in a truck didn't seem realistic. I had no intentions of it becoming a career. I thought more so just a hobby and something fun to kind of fill that creative itch and maybe make a little bit of cash on the weekends. So I randomly was just doing some research and found a company in Portland, Oregon that built custom food bikes and reached out to them, and they sort of started to walk me through the permit process. And I called over to the Baltimore City Health Department, honestly expecting them to be like, no, you cannot ride around selling ice cream on a bike. Like, that's crazy. And I was actually surprised by their reaction. They were like, that's a pretty good idea. I'm not sure why nobody's done that before. And they gave me the same permit as a food truck. I was the first one to ever approach them to sell something from a bike. So they essentially didn't really give me any rules. They were just like, stay out of people's way and, don't park in front of another ice cream shop. It's like, all right. So just sort of ran with it. I joined a local farmer's market, and the rest is honestly history. People loved the bike. People loved the products. Like you sort of mentioned previously, like it brings people back to their childhood kind of. And the whole concept just sort of worked. And again, I would say for the first like 2 years, really had no intentions of it becoming a career. It was just like a summer side hustle, essentially. And then people approached me to cater their weddings or bring the bike to their office. And, it sort of just spiraled from there. And next thing you know, I was using my vacation days at work to, sell ice cream or at these like weekday events that I wasn't able to. And I mean, I can't believe it's been 10 years. It went by in a blink of an eye, but it's been a pretty exciting ride. And I've been very fortunate that most of the business has grown organically. And it's just simply because of the community. Like, the people love the bike and the product. So it's kind of how I got where I am, is just by kind of listening to my customers, going with the flow, and, making some changes as needed.
That's so cool. Okay, so let's talk about the actual apparatus, the bike. So you said you found a random company in Portland, Oregon that makes like cooler bikes. So that was part of your curiosity? You're like, what can I sell? Maybe ice cream. Maybe I do it on a bike. And then did you just hit the old Google machine and try and find someone who was either selling
Yeah.
or making these bikes?
I can't remember if I found the bike and then sort of decided, like, I wish I knew the answer to this, but I can't, like, remember if it was the bike that came first or the product, but I feel like honestly, I found the bike and then sort of worked backwards and was like, oh, this could be cool. What could I sell? I'm sorry, I don't remember that answer. I don't
That's
remember.
okay. I mean, it's all history now. But so
Yeah.
what for our listeners, what do these bikes look like?
So let's see if I can find. This is just a little painting, but it's a tricycle. So it's 3 wheels, and there's a big cooler in the front. And then obviously there's insulation inside the cooler. I use dry ice to keep the product frozen. And then it just pedals like a normal bike. It's, 7 gears. It's got a terrible turning radius. So if you don't plan appropriately, you might need to do, some maneuvering with it other than pedaling. But one of the reasons that my catering business started to turn into what it has is because I cater a lot of weddings, and the bride and groom, one time, just like, it was like my second wedding, very early in my catering days, the bride and groom asked if the bride could sit on the front and the groom could pedal it into the reception and make like a big surprise grand entrance. And of course I said yes, and they did it. I posted it on social media, and like, that is the thing now. Like, that is what my catering business has turned into, is like, some of the times I think I simply get hired. Of course, people love the ice cream, but because they get to like pedal it in and make this cool grand entrance into their party.
Okay, very cool. Well, yeah, we're gonna get to the catering part because that interests me very much so. But I'm still curious. So when you first got this bike, you got the dry ice, you bought some ice cream. Like, did you go to Costco and load it up with like Nestle ice cream, and then you just picked your local beach and started riding around? Like, what did that first day or that first week look like?
So I actually, our like signature item is ice cream sandwiches. So it's 2 cookies with a big scoop of ice in the middle. And partnering with, there's a very well-known ice cream company in Baltimore called Harker Brothers, and they wholesale. I do have a couple retail stores, but I think they do most of their business wholesaling. So I would purchase 2.5-gallon tubs of ice cream from them. I was making my own cookies, and I was building these ice cream sandwiches. I was always changing the flavors, and most of my business up front was done. And I think the very first day I ever sold anything was at a farmer's market. And that farmer's market kind of became like my own little retail front. Like, I had so many people so excited about like, what flavors is she going to have this week? And that it just became this like game kind of what kind of ice cream I was going to be selling from a bike on Saturday mornings at the farmer's market.
Okay. Okay. So farmers market was kind of your welcome to the market, pun
Mhm.
intended, if you will. And was this something that was on weekends? Was it like throughout the summer? Was it open all week and you kind of just rolled in and posted up for 5, 6, 7, 8 hours?
It was every Saturday morning because at the day job, I really only had weekends available to be out there hustling. But it was every Saturday morning, and it started at 7 a.m., which might sound a little bit silly for selling ice cream at 7 a.m., but it actually worked out really well because I was playing around with different flavors, and I would do some like breakfast themed ice cream sandwiches and kind of like tailor to the time of day. But also, I had a lot of people that once I started to build up some, like, demand, and I had like a little following of people who were always wanting to try the product. People would bring coolers and bring them to like barbecues or birthday parties or, whatever they had going on that weekend. So, and I'm so fortunate that that farmer's market was such a good, like, it was right in my neighborhood where I lived. So like I had a good network of people already, but that network just continued to grow. And I still to this day have people that I meet. They're like, oh, I remember you from the farmer's market in 2015. And yeah, so I would say that farmer's market is a huge, huge, huge part of my journey.
Oh, cool. I love that. Well, so let's talk about how you started to actually grow this thing, because it started as a side hustle and then you turned it into your big business here. At what point did you realize that you could leave your day job and turn this into your full time?
So this is like a good and bad part of the story. I was kind of just going with the flow for the first 3.5 years, and I had actually hired a local, like, very small batch manufacturing company to take over the production of the products, just because I was fortunately selling them faster than I had the ability to make them, on top of working a full-time job and being out at the events. And I developed a relationship with this little manufacturer, and we sort of just became family. I swear I owe 90% of my success to them. They truly taught me everything. And then I think it was towards the end of 2018, maybe the beginning of 2019, this family-run business came to me and said they were looking to sell their small pre-made dessert manufacturing company, and they wanted to know if I wanted to buy it. And of course, at first I was like, no, like I work a day job. This isn't a real business. I'm not not really into that. But I sort of sat on it for a few days, and it was kind of one of those like once in a lifetime opportunities sort of that I would have been kind of silly not to go for. But that meant transitioning from like a small organically growing business into like I actually had to get into this. And that was scary, but that's when I ended up deciding it was time to quit my day job. The business had enough, momentum that I sort of felt comfortable with it. I was in a place where I felt prepared to make a pretty substantial investment into the business. And then unfortunately for me, 6 months later, the pandemic happened.
Oh, gosh.
I lost all events. I was wholesaling at the time to casinos and stadiums and hotels and sort of all of the first places to close their doors. So it put me in a pretty tough spot. And at this point right now, I have zero regrets about it because it taught me everything I feel like that an entrepreneur needs to learn. Most of the time, you have to learn those kind of lessons the hard way. And I feel like I did that. I feel like I came out on top. So now I say that the pandemic was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. But if I could go back and do it again, maybe we'd leave that part out. So that's sort of how I kind of unfortunately how I made the transition to doing it full time. And, as the pandemic happened, I really had no choice but to just go all in with every single ounce of energy that I could find inside. So, but it worked out.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you said, so this business that you bought, they were your supplier of your ice cream?
They were making, so they're a dessert ingredient manufacturer. So they make like the bases that go into the ice cream, and they make, the different flavorings that people use to make their ice cream. But they had started a smaller sister company making pre-made desserts because they had so many people, like small business owners such as myself, come to them and say, like, I don't want your ingredients. Like, I need somebody to just make the finished product for me. And it was still such a small scale manufacturer that like the order minimums were extremely small. My products were still made by hand. So like all the pieces that were very important to me, like my product is never going to be a handmade or a machine made product. Like it's a handcrafted product. And so the fact that they could take over doing that for me was pretty amazing. But so they were looking to separate their ingredient business and their pre-made dessert business. So they wanted to solely focus on ingredients. So I took over the pre-made dessert manufacturing company, took back on the production of my own products, and then took over some other private label customers as well. And that's when I really thought my next step was to jump into like wholesaling. I was like, I want these products to be in every grocery store. I want my brand to become a household name. That was probably the silliest thing I could have ever done, but so you learn.
So it became your own in-house distributor manufacturing, right? Yep. So now massive benefit to you is you're buying your own product, right? Like it's all you.
Yes.
Wow.
And
okay.
Yeah, that's what I like. Everything worked out the way it should have. I am so incredibly grateful for the pandemic and all those struggles because it truly like led me down this like windy, crazy path to like where I feel like I needed to be. And yes, making my own products is amazing. My margins because of that are so incredibly good. But I feel like it's important to keep in mind, and what I always tell like my Bike Business University students is that like, yes, making your own ice cream, the margins are so much better, but the investment that goes into making your own ice cream, like you have to be prepared for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I imagine margins are a huge part of it. And while we're talking about the business math and the margins here, what do the margins look like for your business, and what does a business like yours do in terms of top line?
So my catering business, and again, this is just catering because hopefully next year we'll be talking double these numbers as I bring back my online store and everything, but my catering business does about $100,000 between the months of May and September. And my margins are and this is again for catering where I charge like service fees and delivery fees and costs to rent bikes. So there's so like 50% of my invoice for a catering event is fees versus the cost of the product. And my margins for catering are about 75%, which again has not always been that way, but over the years I kind of take a step back every single winter and like reevaluate like how I can get costs down. After 10 years of doing that, I have a pretty good little business model.
Yeah, you're telling me 75% margin. I don't think anyone's gonna cry over that. That's for darn
Yeah.
sure. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about how so you continue to grow. You can kind of buy out your own, manufacturing company. What did the growth of Cream Cruiser look like? Did you start hiring a team? Did you have managers? Did you have multiple bikes? Were you more focused just on the catering and the weddings type of gigs, or were you guys still cruising beaches and boardwalks?
So right after I purchased the manufacturing company, I immediately brought on a full-time production guy. And you could kind of, I guess, I mean, he probably actually does more than I do. So you could call him a manager. And he was my only full-time staff. I had lots of people that helped part-time with different events and sort of more as like on-call kind of schedule. But right after that, like in that transition, like I thought my next thing was going to be jumping into wholesale. So I pretty much put not all of my eggs in the wholesale basket. Like I sort of thought like I'd outgrow catering sort of. And I thought that like wholesale was going to be like what made it for me. And it turns out I was totally wrong about that. So I spent way too many years just really going after the wholesale business to learn that that is a very hard business and the margins are certainly not 75%.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until I would say like probably like the beginning of 2023 when the life had really started to kind of like go back to normal. And that's when I like transitioned back to like, no, catering, that was stupid. Like catering is where the money is. Catering is what makes me happy. And it just was like clear to me at that time that like that needed to be my all in. And I still have in regards to, I guess your question about staff, like I still have a full-time production guy and just a couple people that help with events here and there. We're a small team, very small team, but I'm very lucky with the people that I have. They are just as all in as I am. So it makes it pretty easy and wonderful.
Awesome. So are your events is like the bike still kind of the thing, or do you guys, I mean, when you're catering, you guys are the kind of the dessert section, right? So if you're at a wedding, you're catering the desserts and the bike is kind of like the photo op type of thing, or are you guys bringing in all sorts of, I mean, imagine it's gotta be a lot of desserts you bring in. It's not just the bike.
No, the bike's pretty much the thing. We do offer different options where like we have like different cooler setups. You know, if it's a smaller event, people don't want the bike. We also, just every once in a while we'll like drop it off to the caterer or the caterer that's like actually doing the food for the wedding, and then they'll serve the ice cream. I would say like 8 times out of 10 people want the bike. The bike is, like you said, a photo op. They can ride it in. It's an experience. And it's got a pretty cool little community in Baltimore of people that just have known it over the years. And it's sort of fun to, for people to surprise their local guests with the bike. And a lot of people recognize it. So bike's more important than anything, probably.
Okay, so maybe I missed this part. Is there like a portion of your business where the bike is deployed on weekends at the beach, or is that was how it started? And then the margins probably may have become in the catering side of it, doing events.
So actually, when the beaches near me, that they don't allow street vendors. So that was kind of part of my plan. You've probably seen lots of stuff on social media about like I used to bring, because I had a lot of wholesale accounts at the beach, so I'd bring the bike as like a promotional opportunity sort of. But the beaches in Maryland and Delaware that are close to me, they don't allow any. It's my understanding they have one ice cream truck, a Good Humor truck, who has been doing that route for so many years that he's just like grandfathered in, and I'm sure he pays the city gobs of money for his permit, and that for that reason they won't allow any other street vendors at the beaches.
Okay.
It was different in Baltimore. I did lots of just riding around, which I know Baltimore gets a bad rap, but it wasn't always that bad. So I probably wouldn't ride it around the streets of Baltimore now, but 10 years ago it was a little bit different. So I did lots of just like cruising around in Baltimore, but unfortunately I was never allowed to at the beach.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, so this is kind of like the classic, like the hot dog carts, right? In the bigger cities where they post up on a street corner and put out their umbrella and serve hot dogs all day, right? It's just like you as ice cream.
Yeah, and I had, again, because I was working a full-time job, I had a couple of people that either, worked at like hotels or nurses that kind of had schedules that are a little bit different than mine. And they would just like on a random Tuesday call me and be like, hey, do you mind if I take the bike out and go try and sell some ice cream? and I was paying them $1 per sandwich that they sold. So it was like incentive for them to just go out there and get in front of as many people as possible. And it worked
Yeah.
great for me because I was, only paying a commission essentially. And I had, I had like a group of people that would, for a Friday night, for example, they'd be like, hey, we've got nothing to do. Can we take the bike up? Sure.
Yeah. So what was it ever part of your plan to build a fleet of these bikes and just deploy them throughout Baltimore, throughout neighboring cities? Or was that something maybe you evaluated as something A, I either don't want to do, or B, maybe it wouldn't be what you wanted it to be?
I've thought about it. I do have 2 bikes just because on many occasions we are double booked. And I think I would say before the pandemic, when the bike, before I transitioned into that wholesale mess, the bike was, at the beginning was obviously my focus. And I think that was definitely a part of the plan then. And I had so many, as I mentioned, teachers and, the people that were wanting to help, that I definitely think prior to the pandemic, that was a plan. Now, I feel like I don't want to call it in the lazy entrepreneur phase, because I'm still definitely hustling just differently. And I feel like the thought of managing multiple bikes kind of gives me a little bit of anxiety. And I feel like what I'm doing right now is just working so well that 2 bikes is perfect.
Yeah. Okay. So how many events throughout the high season do you typically do? I guess let's say in a month span.
In a month span, I mean, it's funny because it's Memorial Day and Labor Day are slammed. July, really, I would say beginning of summer and end of summer, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 events a week. And then July is pretty quiet. And I'm not sure if that's because in Maryland, it's super humid and, weddings slow down because people don't want to be, standing out there baking in the heat. I do a lot with colleges. So graduation and back to school are super popular. And then there's just this lull in July. So I would say maybe July, 2 events a week. And I could probably ramp that up if I wanted to. But yeah, the colleges are definitely my big thing. I do a lot with Johns Hopkins University, and they'll call me, a week before and be like, hey, can you come next week for 2,500 people? And I'll sit there and hand out 2,500 ice creams to the students, talk up, and then come back the next day. And it's there's a huge rush for them. It's boom, 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 all with colleges for beginning and end of summer.
Okay. Wow. So, 2,500 people. So you got to bring a truckload of cookies, don't you? Or
yeah,
cookie
have a pretty good system. We have a big cargo van. We have this massive blue. I mean, they're half as tall as I am, huge coolers that we can probably fit 800 to 1,000 ice cream sandwiches in. So we keep those stocked, try and park the van close by, and just kind of refill the bike as needed. And again, we do have 2 bikes, and occasionally I'll bring 2 bikes for that. But to be honest, most of the time it's easier, with one to just restock that one versus worrying about restocking 2. That's also the beauty of I sell only prepackaged products. It's we're not scooping anything on site. It's super easy. You just one after the other handing them out to people. And luckily there's not really lines and it moves pretty quick.
Right. And I imagine with your catered events, the organizer pays you your fee in advance, and you're you don't have to take credit card payments or from each individual person. You're just handing them out, right?
Exactly. And a lot of times with Johns Hopkins specifically, who again is my biggest catering client, they'll have an incentive for the students. Okay, scan this QR code. You have to download the app that they're trying to promote. So it's the students have to do something really quick that they can do on their phone in 3 seconds. And when they do that, they get the ice cream. So
oh, there you go.
Yeah, it's a pretty good
dog reward system there, right? That's very cool. All right. So I want to talk about pricing. What was it hard for you to figure out what to sell your products at, or did pricing fluctuate, or was that pretty easy for you?
It's definitely fluctuated over the years. I started out, again, 10 years ago, I was selling the ice cream sandwich for $5, mainly for the fact that it was just easy, because I was at a farmer's market dealing with cash, $5 was just simple. And then I think I did $5 for the first 2 years, and maybe the third year I increased to $6. And it's I wish I had one to show you, but it's people call it the size of a cheeseburger. It's a pretty large ice cream sandwich. It's very clear that it's handmade. So I've never really had people complain about the price. And now I actually sell them for $7. And that's obviously just, as especially post-pandemic, things got like incredibly expensive. $7 is my go-to for the sandwiches. And then I do sorbet push pops too, which I sell for $6. People, I mean, I think it's a pretty fair price, but I don't think starting at $5, I think was also very fair, but I think the increase has sort of made sense over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in today's day and age, $7 for a quality, large size ice cream sandwich sounds pretty reasonable.
Yeah,
Probably even on the East Coast, maybe you could get away with more because I
I
mean it's
know,
more expensive there too.
right? That's what people tell me. You could sell this for 12. Well, that's like a little much.
Oh, that's great. So, was there ever a time when you were like, because I don't know about you, but I get shiny object syndrome as an entrepreneur many times, even in a
Mhm.
single month or day. But were there times where you're like, well, maybe we could expand this into ice cream, like actual scoop ice cream, and then like different types of products? Because I noticed that you only sell the ice cream sandwiches and the sorbet push pops. Was that your goal to keep it very narrow, or did you ever consider expanding out?
I definitely have considered when I was really diving into wholesale, I was doing, selling 3-gallon tubs, 5-liter pans. I tried like making little like parfaits. So I definitely have tried many things over the years. But yes, I do have shiny object syndrome. And sometimes, and maybe that's like just, like I said, like 8 years, it sort of took 8 years for things to kind of fall together. And I sort of think these last 2 years, I've really only been focused on the sandwiches and the push pops because that's what works. And I've finally learned enough lessons the hard way to just remember to stick with what works. But yes, I very much have shiny object syndrome. I go through phases where I'm like, oh, I want to open, like the Chipotle of ice cream sandwiches, sort of, where it's like you go in and you pick your toppings, and that is not something I really want to do. But sometimes it's hard to remind myself that I don't want to do that.
Yeah, it's one of those things I'm sure many of our listeners can relate is where one day you're like all gung ho doing something different. You got this idea, it's going to be amazing. And then maybe a day or two passes and you're like, I'm glad I didn't act on that because I don't think I want to do
Yeah,
that.
it's funny. The little town that we're living in Colorado that I was just telling you has 400 people. It's the cutest little town in the whole entire world. It's lacking in ice cream shop. It has like your basics, like one bar, one pizza shop, and a little general store. But what it really needs is an ice cream shop. And every single person I meet, when they find out what I do for a living, they're like, "You got to open an ice cream shop." There's times where I'm like, "Yeah, that I totally should." But one, the town has 400 people, so I can't imagine the return that I'll get on that investment. And also, like, I feel like every entrepreneur works to get to, and by no means am I saying like I've made it, and but like to get to the point where your business kind of just works. Like that's not something that every entrepreneur gets to experience. I sure hope that they do, but I feel like I'm finally to the point where I can sort of enjoy being a business owner, and I need to remind myself often to like stick to that. Like you've worked hard to get to this point. Now it's time to chill out a little bit.
Right, right. Well, and you said your top line per month in your seasonal, I forget what you said earlier, but I mean, that's a heck of a business in like half of a year, right?
Yes. Yeah, I'm very fortunate. And then again, sort of my off-season project is the Bike Business University stuff, which,
Right. Yeah. And
yeah,
so let's talk about that. That's next on my agenda because I'm really interested to hear more about Bike Business University. What was the impetus for that? When did you start that? And what does Bike Business University look like?
so I started about 2 years ago, and it really just started because I was like sharing. I started the Ice Cream Bike Lady social media account and just kind of was like sharing my journey. It was as I was going through that transition of coming out of the pandemic, cutting out the wholesale, and just like, what the heck am I supposed to be doing, sort of thing. And I started sharing my journey. And at that time, simultaneously, like catering started to come back. And it really, when something's taken away from you, you don't really realize how much you miss it until it comes back, and you sort of fall in love with it all over again. And that was catering for me. Like catering started to come back, and I was really realizing like wholesale has never been a passion of mine. Like these pink bikes right here, like this is my passion. And it really just reignited that. So I started sharing that journey on social media. And I had so many people, I think, because like the mobile industry is kind of, I think, like an ever growing industry at this point. And people were looking to kind of like fill sort of the same way as me, like fill a creative void they had kind of lost during the pandemic. And as I was sharing my journey of how I started the business, I had so many people be like, wait, I want to do this. How did you start? Where did you get the bike? Just question after question after question. I started taking on like one-on-one clients and helping them. I don't know if coaching or consulting, whichever is the right term, but helping them like physically working one-on-one to help them build a business. And then I just had so many people inquire about that I kind of maxed out pretty quickly and ended up transitioning that to taking everything that I was giving these one-on-one clients into like a pre-packaged, pre-recorded program. And that's how Bike Business University came to life. I launched it, I think it was May of last year. And I did a pre-sale before I'd even created it, because it's like, I don't want to create it if nobody's going to buy it. And so I did a pre-sale. Right. Within like the first week, I had like, I don't know, however many people signed up for it. And I was like, oh my gosh, we gotta make this happen. Yeah. And it's turned into more than I ever could have dreamed of. I feel like social media has this like wild way of pulling together the people that, are kind of like meant to be with you, sort of. Mm-hmm. And it's just, I've connected with hundreds of people all throughout the country, and the program has evolved so much. I'm always updating it. So like every time I think of, something else that's worked for me or my business, or I like pop that into the program. So once people have access to it, once they become a student, they get all the updates, and it's turned into a really cool community. Like we do monthly Zoom meetings. Everybody inside is so supportive and is like sharing what they've learned and, firsthand experience. And it's truly turned into more than I ever could have dreamed of. I feel so lucky.
Okay. Awesome. So you've created a small army of other bike business entrepreneurs.
Yeah. I hope one day to make this community just as big as the food truck community, but one day at a time.
Okay. So you've had students where they come in, they learn from you, and so you have pre-recorded course material. You have an online community on the back end. Is that where you said you have a monthly Zoom call, but are you doing like ongoing coaching, or if someone has a question, they can reach out in an online forum, or what does that look like?
So I have a Facebook group, which is very interactive, but I also, I don't know if mentorship is the right word, but they get mentorship from me too. So anytime they have questions, they can email me, and I'm happy to help at any time throughout their journey. And I would say most people are pretty interactive about it. Like people aren't shy with asking questions, which I love. The monthly Zooms are so much fun. It's like more so the people in the community kind of like teaching each other essentially, which makes me feel really good that like they're just happy to. It's really inspiring. It's definitely really inspiring to hear everybody's excitement about their new business.
Yeah. Do you have any stories you can share from a student of yours who has gone on to create this type of business, or do they run the business in a very similar fashion to you, or do they put their own personal twist on it?
Everybody definitely puts their own personal twist on it. And I think that's my favorite part about it, is seeing everybody's, like when they get the bike, seeing their brand, and it's like hearing everybody's story that goes into the brand. So I would say most people, go with the sandwiches and pops, and inside of Bike Business University, I teach everybody how to like replicate my exact products, because I feel like those have been a huge part of what got me to where I am. So people typically stick with the sandwiches and pops, but they put their own twist on the flavors, of course, and the brand. I love seeing everybody's brand. And, I give them I give templates for like labels and that kind of stuff. So it makes it very easy to put their own twist on. They just have to like swap out colors, add their logo, but everybody's brand and like hearing their story behind their brand is probably my favorite part about it.
Awesome. What's the general startup cost if I were to say, Catherine, I'm all in, I'm going to go start a bike business, what would you say are the startup costs to do that?
I typically tell people to plan for $15,000, although that's most of the time a little bit over the top. It can be done for, I would say, $10,000. I started mine 10 years ago for a little over $8,000. Of course, things have increased a little bit, but I would say $10,000 is more than enough if you keep it simple. And that's one thing I really preach to my students, is that like starting small and, growing as time and money allow is probably, for a business like this, is probably the best thing that you can do. And of course, some people want to like invest in a van at the beginning and, kind of do the like over the top, the bells and whistles, but I actually encourage you not to do that and just sort of get scrappy and, creative with your either renting a vehicle or borrowing a vehicle as long as possible, because keeping that startup cost down is, in my opinion, a huge part of what's going to make it successful.
Right. So a business like this, you can become profitable or get your ROI on your initial investment relatively quickly. Like if you're doing, when you're starting out, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but when you were starting out, you were probably doing the $1, $2, $3, $4, $5,000 a month type of revenue. And
Mm-hmm.
then over time, you started growing it to 10 and 10 plus. Probably, I mean, I guess the earning potential of this within 1 year is really dependent on how much effort and how much hustle that the bike business owner puts into it right off the rip. Is that accurate?
Yes, absolutely. I started for a little over $8,000, and I made every penny back my first season. But I 100% agree. Like I was out there every single Saturday morning. I was, spent every waking moment marketing on social media and networking and, trying to just build the brand in the community. And I 100% agree that, I mean, you get out of it what you put in, not just with this business, but any business. But in this specifically, because like it takes time, being out at events and, farmers markets and festivals, like that's a huge part of the marketing that goes into getting the catering clients as well. So I 100% agree that being, 100% committed and all in, and, the crazy lady that can't sleep at night because all you think about is ice cream sandwiches, like that is what will get you where you want to go.
So this can really become a $10,000 a month business in no time at all. I shouldn't
Yeah.
say no time, but rather quick time.
Yeah. I mean, I know some people, like some of my students that are, committed to putting the hours in and are already within 6 months, like booking catering events and weddings. And really all it takes is like, I would say like 3, 4 like catering events a month to have a $10,000+ business. So it's doable, but
Yeah.
with
And
anything,
is the average catering event, like if you're catering a wedding and it has 200 people at it, what's your average invoice look like when you're walking away from that type of event?
so it comes down to about $10 per person with the cost of the product and the fees that I charge. So for 200 people, it would be about $2,000 invoice. And at this point, it hasn't always been this way, but I have a minimum. I won't come out for less than 100. Like if you want the whole ice cream bike experience, there's a minimum of 100 and
100 people?
100 people. Yes.
Okay.
And then we have smaller options, like I think I mentioned previously, coolers, and if people don't want the whole setup. But I would say my average invoice price is probably $1,500 to $2,000. Obviously, aside from the college events that are for thousands of people, those are a little bit more.
Right, right. And does that include like delivery and on-site employees that are doing the work?
Yep, exactly. So I charge $6 and $7 per ice cream sandwich and push pop, and then I charge a $500, I call a bike rental and service fee, which includes like the staff and the bike. And then I charge a minimum of $150 delivery fee, and that's based per mileage, like how far we're going.
Okay, very cool. So you look at if you do 4 weddings a month at an average ticket of $2,000 or $1,500, you're looking at an anywhere from $6,000 to $8,000 business, and that you can mix in however many other events you can handle in between. So that's pretty awesome. I mean, the catering business, there's a lot of money in the catering business, and there's a lot of opportunity. So I love hearing that. And one thing you mentioned that I can't believe I haven't asked yet, I own a marketing company, so I'm surprised I didn't ask, but you mentioned marketing. When you were starting out and currently now that you're 10 years into this, what did your marketing look like? What does it look like today? I mean, it sure sounds like you started awfully organically. Did you invest in any other forms of marketing along the way?
Social media has always been obviously a huge part of it. And I sort of feel like going back to like day one, it was like right at that time where Instagram was kind of becoming a thing. It was less reels and, the fancy stuff. It was just posting pictures of, but it kind of turned into a little game of like, where can I find where can I find her? What's she going to have? And so social media was a huge part of my marketing. And then really just being out at the farmers market. Like it kind of sounds silly, but like it's the right people that come to the farmers market. And it's like the relationships I built at that farmers market introduced me to other people and other opportunities. So I think just being out there and people seeing the bike is also a huge part of what really helped my marketing. I never really did any kind of paid advertising. I've been fortunate to have a couple like articles published and stuff that have really helped. And that's something that I tell my Bike Business University students is like, it's okay to like ask for that stuff too. Like you got to put yourself out there, and those sort of opportunities can be life-changing. So it certainly doesn't hurt to, to ask for it. But yeah, it's really been pretty organic. We're a lot of word of mouth. And I think I've mentioned, but like I'm very lucky that I have a good repeat group of catering clients. And it's like, I think one thing that's incredibly important to me is my relationships. I take those so incredibly seriously. And that's been a huge part of like building those relationships to book more events and sell more products and just watch the opportunities kind of come based off of my network.
Yeah. Yeah. That's some of the coolest stuff when you hear businesses that have been able to grow to the level they're at without doing much more than organic marketing work and a little bit of social media, but also just being out there, being present and being seen. At the end of the day, especially when you're starting out, that's the number one way is you just got to get out there. So I love hearing that. Awesome. Well, Katherine, this has been a ton of fun. Your business is still super interesting to me. I feel like there should be a cream cruiser out by me here in Ohio, but you guys would absolutely crush at these events. But I want to make sure that all our listeners are able to get in contact with you or check you out on social, or definitely be able to check out Bike Business University. What are the best ways to do so?
Cool. So Bike Business University the website is bikebusinessuniversity.com. There's a ton of information there. And then the account where I really, share the real raw behind the scenes and, give you a sort of insider look on the business. That Instagram account is Ice Cream Bike Lady. And then if you're interested in my actual ice cream business, Cream Cruiser, on social media or website is just Cream Cruiser.
Awesome. I love it. And if we could leave our listeners with one piece of advice from you, what would it be in terms of starting a business and getting after it? From your years of experience as an entrepreneur, if you could distill it down to one piece of advice, what would that be?
Oh man, I think my biggest piece of advice would just be to like go for it. Like you have to kind of like we were just talking about, like you have to fully commit. I see a lot of people nowadays that like start and give it 6 months and are like, oh, I can't make this work. I've tried and it's not going to work. Like it takes so much longer than 6 months. So I think my biggest piece of advice would just be to like keep your head down, stay focused, trust the process, and like learn from every single thing that goes wrong, because there's always incredible opportunities on the other side of those struggles and those challenges. I guess like, you said one, but like part two would
go for it.
To not be afraid to put yourself out there. And I think that was the biggest lesson that I learned in the last 2 years with this Ice Cream Bike Lady account is that like, I'm incredibly introverted. I'm shy. I'm like not good at this kind of stuff. But like I finally started really, truly sharing my journey. And what that has done for not only my personal life, but for my business is unreal. And I like encourage everybody so much to use social media for what it has the opportunity to do for not only you, but for your business as well.
I love that. I love that. Consistently taking action and not being afraid to let your flag fly, right? Just get out there and do the thing. We're all only here one time. We might as well have a heck of a time doing it and share our journey with others. So, well, Katherine, this has been so cool. Thank you so much for joining us. Absolute pleasure, and best of luck to you in the future with Cream Cruiser and with your new move to Colorado.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll talk soon.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thanks.